Welcome to the All Things Wildfire podcast, where we delve into the latest trends and hot topics in protecting properties against wildfire. So sit back, relax, and join us as we arm you against disaster.
Okay, everyone, welcome to another podcast with All Things Wildfire. Today, holy moly, I've got Chief Berlant. I'm so excited, Chief, as California State Fire Marshal. Wow, you hold such a massive responsibility, and I'm so grateful to have you on the show. And I just want to share with the listeners really quick. I saw you, Chief, at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They had a fire burn in Orange County, California, kind of a test to kind of show the science behind 0 to 5 and how important it is. And when I saw you speak there, Chief, I thought, okay, this gentleman is absolutely well-spoken, and 100% when people understand who you are, I think we are all going to rally behind your position and the responsibility that you carry. And there's no other person that I think could really take us to the next level of wildfire safety. So, Chief, thank you for joining us, and welcome.
Well, I am humbled by that introduction, but very much appreciative of the opportunity to join you and talk about such a critical thing. And, you know, the State Fire Marshal has a lot of responsibilities. I oversee everything from the transportation of liquid petroleum to regulating fireworks, but wildfire prevention here in the state is obviously a high priority of the governor and for our Department of Cal Fire. And so just really appreciative of the opportunity to talk about those efforts.
Love it. Love it. And Chief, I'm going to jump in on a handful of questions that I have for you, but feel free to expand on them. Many of our listeners are comprised of insurance professionals, realtors, firefighters, fire captains, and a lot of people, homeowners, that are just interested on what they can do to better protect their homes and their properties against the threat of wildfire and everything that comes with it, especially with these insurance rates that are challenging the end user, all of us as homeowners. So, Chief, I'm going to jump right in with a few questions, if you don't mind. With regards to the 0 to 5, 0 to 5 meaning that ember resistant zone, how important is that, in your opinion, to prevent damage?
It's critically important. And while here in California we have required defensible space around homes for decades, you know, the unfortunate part of all of the destruction that we've experienced in California the last number of years, with well over 60,000 homes and buildings being destroyed, we've learned a lot from that destruction. And in recent times, we've partnered with many research groups, including the insurance industry, to put science behind our wildfire mitigation efforts. And really what we have seen through our own research, through our own analysis of the destruction, and through those experiments and testing that we've done, is that 0 to 5 foot is really a critically missing link to this overall mitigation measures that we need. We've really found that it's the combination of good defensible space, including the ember resistance zone, along with home hardening, or ensuring that the home is built to wildfire resistant type of materials, ember resistant materials. It's that combination that, backed by our research, our science, our analysis, that tells us that those two measures give a significant increase to a home's chance of surviving. And so that 0 to 5 feet, though, while it's really kind of the latest focus of ours, it really is kind of that last mile, if you will, of focus to really, I think, work towards reducing the destruction that unfortunately we've been experiencing for the last several years, the last decade here in California.
I love that, Chief, and I think the way you put it, like this 0 to 5 could be like the last mile to get us to this place of more safety. And it just reminds me, one of our fire captains here, Rich Snyder, uses this analogy. He says, you know, now when we get into a vehicle, it would seem odd for us not to put our seatbelt on. But, I grew up in the 70s. And so, we didn't have seatbelts. And I was sliding around the seat, where my father's Chevy Nova with no seatbelts, and we're sliding in the back seat. And now this feels like this is what's coming, is like this is the new seatbelt for us as homeowners, to say this is now the new acceptable thing that we really need to embrace and not reject, so we can be safer for ourselves as the homeowners, but also with our neighbors. So I love that you mentioned that this feels like the last mile. So it sounds like, Chief, that the 0 to 5 is very significant in the findings of wildfire safety.
Yeah, in our own analysis and our own experiences, with our firefighters, but with much of the research done by organizations like NIST, the National Institute for Science and Technology, IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. This isn't just our experiences. This is actual science that goes into the fact that you can build to the best standards that we do have here in California for new construction. You can have 100 feet of defensible space, but if you have flammable items right up against the home, that home is going to burn. And so we have to take this, again, last mile. And I do love the analogy about the seatbelt, because back in the 60s, when we first instituted the requirement for defensible space, it was only 30 feet. We still were having homes that were being destroyed. In the mid-2000s or early 2000s, we extended that to 100 feet. And so we're just constantly learning. 2008, we added the new code for building construction, and now that's 0 to 5 foot. And so we've learned a lot over the decades. And I can remember back when I started my career, we transitioned from 30 feet of defensible space to 100 feet. And man, that was so difficult for many homeowners to understand why we needed to do this and how this was going to be even practical. Right. And so, for many people, it seems overwhelming to remove flammable or all vegetation, plants, and your rose bushes that have been out in front of some homes for decades. It seems very difficult and challenging to do. But just like when we moved to 3,100 feet today, nobody blinks an eye at the need for 100 feet. We just understand that's the right number. And so I do think that with the 0 to 5 foot, while transitioning ourselves to this new normal of needing to have mitigations of the climate that we have here in California, it's going to be, at the end of the day, maybe decades later, people are going to see that this small step, as hard as it may be and it may seem, is actually going to make a big difference.
Absolutely. I love it. Chief, let me ask you, with regards to the high fire severity zone maps that are out, with regards to the local responsibility areas, when do you anticipate the new maps are going to be coming out that are going to show us, now how many more homes are impacted in this area?
We have been working for a number of years to build a new model to really take in the latest technologies, the latest science, to be able to identify and categorize California, across the state of California, the areas in the various levels of hazard. How likely is a wildfire to occur in that area? We incorporated a lot of new science, a lot of new data that wasn't available to us previously, and that helped us build a very strong model that really was field tested, backed up by researchers that validated the work. And we overlaid that first over the state responsibility area. This is about a third of the state that CAL FIRE protects for wildfires, prevents wildfires. And we went through over 150 days of public comment to receive input from the public to make sure that we had that map right. Nice. And as of April 1st of 2024 this year, that map went into effect. Again, that's the state responsibility area. To your question, though, the other third of the state is governed by local responsibility area. These are incorporated cities, agricultural land, areas that are very dense in population. These are lands, again, that are responsible of a local fire department. We have, again, built the map, the science at least, and we're working to build out a rollout plan. There is been a lot of change in our risk and our hazards related to wildfires. And so we know many local governments are waiting to see what the map says. We know that people assume that there's this connection between if I go into a higher level of hazard in this new mapping that comes out, that is going to affect their insurance or affect their ability to sell their homes. And the reality is that we are getting very close to having a really good map that we can provide to local governments to allow the public to look at it. But at the end of the day, to circle back to what I just said, the perceptions that exist with the maps, the concerns related to insurance and other impacts, really we have found are not necessarily the case. While we are using hazard factors that develop the categorization of this map to help us determine the mitigations that we should require, insurance companies are using risk modeling. They are using factors that, yes, in some cases are same as the hazard factors we're using, but with risk, you're incorporating other things. When was the home built? Does it have good defensible space? Those are really important things that we don't incorporate in hazard mapping. It's risk versus hazard. And so what we found with many of our insurance companies, but in the black box, if you will, behind the scenes, they already are using the factors that we incorporated into the map. They already knew that weather conditions had changed here in California from the last time we did. And so that is really what has changed in the insurance market. It's not the maps, and it's not the color of the map that we designate that affects insurance availability and pricing, but they are the same factors. The risk to wildfires, the hazard of wildfires have changed and have grown into areas that 15 years ago, 20 years ago didn't exist. That was a very long ways to saying we're very close to being able to start discussing what those LRA maps are, but we really want to make sure we have a solid rollout plan so that our local partners, the cities and counties that are ultimately responsible for adopting it, we've built in a process where they have a review, they have the ability to provide comment, and then have the support and the resources to adopt the map, and then get us to a place where we've now mapped really most of the state. We don't map federally owned land. It's just outside of the purview of the state of California, but we are getting to a place where soon we will have updated local responsibility area maps, but I don't have a hard date for you.
Chief, you bring up a good point. We've spoken to quite a bit of insurance professionals, and you're right. They're not using these maps to make their coverage decisions. Oftentimes, what I'm hearing too is that the insurance carriers, as a carrier, as a company, have to also take into consideration how much risk they have in proximity in this area, right? And so that could be a deciding factor outside of the maps, outside of other things, where they're saying, hey, you know what, we've got too much risk in one area and we're going to decide not to provide coverage. So there are many, many variables, and I appreciate you saying that, because too often the insurance companies are seen as the bad guys. And quite frankly, I applaud them, and I know this is not something that people are a fan of, but the reality for me, and I don't know how you feel, but the fact that they're bringing this problem to the forefront, and they're saying number one, they can't afford to do this because it's costing a lot of money, and it really just puts the responsibility and risk back on us as homeowners to say we need to do our part. We need to do our part for our home and our properties and our buildings to become more insurable. And I feel like that message is getting watered down because everyone's, they're picketing the insurance company almost. But the reality is this is really, in this economy, we need insurance. And so together we need to work together to figure out what is it you need, Mr. Carrier, and what do we need as homeowners to really bridge this gap and come together. And I see that you're working with the Department of Insurance, you're working with the governor to really make this happen. And I do not envy your position, but can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges and what you see coming, and when do you, maybe it's too early to ask, but when do you see us getting to the finish line of some, maybe it's a few years down the road, but what does that look like? Because it's a different battleground, I would imagine, for you.
It is a very different battleground than our wildfires and our emergency incidents. There's obviously a lot more politics, a lot more emotion. I can tell you from my own experiences of not being able to get insurance and being told that because of these fire hazard severity zone maps that I'm in too high of a hazard, and I have to kind of chuckle because it's myself and our team that set that, and actually I don't live in a very high fire hazard severity zone area. So there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of perceptions that are out there. But to your point, I have worked, and my team have worked very closely with not only the Department of Insurance, the regulator for insurance companies, but with the insurance associations. We've partnered with, as I mentioned earlier, the research arm of the insurance industry. And really my focus has been, and my role in all of this, is to ensure that the wildfire mitigations that we require and we know as firefighters are critically important, that we are aligned in the requirements that the Department of Insurance requires of their insurers, and that we're taking account that those mitigations matter, because they do matter. We know that they are impactful, and so the role has really been to be technical experts, if you will, in wildfire mitigation. And we have a great relationship with the Department of Insurance, who also takes some unfortunate criticism related to this challenge that we have related to wildfires and the pricing and availability of insurance. But we have been committed, and we being myself, our office, CAL FIRE, this administration, to working with the Department of Insurance throughout their regulatory processes. The Safer from Wildfires framework that they recently released that really gives a structure for these mitigations and how that can play into affordability or availability of insurance. The insurance commissioner rolled out recently his sustainable insurance plan, and that does continue to incorporate wildfire mitigations and wildfire efforts as part of it. And so we'll continue to make sure that we are an asset to the insurance industry, so the carriers, like you said, the Department of Insurance, and the general public, that we're just all saying the same thing, that we're aligned in the mitigations that we require. And to your question, though, I can't tell you how quickly we'll start to see a stabilization, if you will, of insurance impacts based on wildfires. That's really outside my purview, but we'll continue to work with all of our partners to get that wildfire alignment in those mitigation efforts, that education to insurance companies. Back to my earlier comment about my own carrier telling me I'm at too high of a fire risk, and I'm telling them I'm actually not. There's a lot of education that goes into that, and I'll tell you, the insurance associations are very open and are great partners of ours to help try to get that messaging out to not only the carriers, but to the brokers, to the folks that are working in the insurance industry, that are interacting with the public, to make sure that we're educated, all of us, at the same level of what is it that we mean when we talk about wildfire danger? What does it mean when we talk about wildfire mitigation? So that we're not having people misperceive the true complexities of this wildfire insurance challenge that California is facing.
You bet. And Chief, would you say, because and this is just my opinion, but I feel like IBHS has like a gold standard of this is what you need to be doing to mitigate as much as possible wildfire damage to your property. And I'm proud to say that in working with IBHS a year and a half ago, I actually got certification to have a Wildfire Prepared Home Plus designation here in Southern California. So I'm excited, and I had to do a handful of things, but I want to take this serious for myself, and I now have become the minister to my community as to what we need to do together to have more prevention measures for our entire HOA where I live. But would you agree that if more homeowners and more of us began to see, for example, in this particular case, IBHS and their standards, if we began to agree and do some of these things, that for now, that would put us in a much better position? And or do you have other things that you would add in addition to their requirements?
I would agree it's a gold standard. But I'll also take a step back and say the state's requirements for defensible space, home hardening, even our development standards, roadway widths, water supply, that really is the right standard for us to make a difference in keeping people safe, keeping homes from being destroyed. The challenge, though, in that effort is the fact that most of our homes in wildfire-prone areas were built well before the current wildfire urban interface building codes. So if people don't know, here in California, we have had really one of the most stringent building codes for wildfires in the nation. For all new homes constructed after 2008. But the problem is the 90% of the homes that were built prior to 2008 in wildfire-prone areas are not built to that code. And so how do we harden those homes? How do we retrofit those homes is really the challenge. And so obviously the IBHS program, which I don't necessarily and can't endorse a program per se, but it really provides a level of certification, if you will, for the insurance companies that you've done all the right things. And to your point about your Wildfire Prepared Home Plus, there are a lot of things people can do that are well beyond the minimum code that we set, that we know makes a difference, but it just strengthens and builds upon the state's minimum standard. Now, going back to the fact that, again, most homes in California in wildfire-prone areas were built before the current code, we're really focusing on trying to give tools to homeowners on how to retrofit their home, how to do simple construction or simple home improvements that really can make a critical difference. We, a couple years ago, launched what we call our low-cost retrofit list. Things you can do without a contractor, with very little experience and sometimes very little time and no necessarily money, that really make an impactful difference. We know there are other mitigations that do cost money, and that creates its own challenge. How do we help the Californians who can't afford to do this work or can't physically do this work? Our vulnerable populations here in California need to be addressed as well and supported, because if you and I do everything that we need to do that's right, we bring our homes up to standard or they're built to the current standard, but our next door neighbor can't afford to do it, just because we've done everything right, their home puts us still at risk. And so we've got to make sure that really as a community, as a neighborhood, of course based on density, but that at a community scale, we are taking mitigation measures so that the entire neighborhood can be protected. And so helping those who can't necessarily help themselves has to be a part of our journey here.
Love it. And Chief, I did notice, I think it was last year, there were some grants that were given out to a few different communities that were financially challenged, if you will. And I see these grants now coming to fruition where some of the work is being done. Were you part of putting that together as well?
Well, first I will say our team has done the heavy lift. I am honored to be the chair of a joint powers authority with the California Office of Emergency Services, and over the last several years we've built a framework of a financial assistance retrofit program. We're piloting it really in 6 counties right now: Lake County, San Diego County, Shasta County, Tuolumne County, El Dorado County, and then most recently we're bringing on defensible space focused in Siskiyou County, but very excited that in Lake County we have finally been able to work through a number of barriers to get this program off the ground. The success, if you will, of the program is the fact that we're using a matching, and when I say matching, upwards of 90% of that funding is coming from federal FEMA hazard mitigation dollars. So wow. They are matching dollars that the state has put in to help vulnerable Californians in this program. And in Lake County, in the northern part of the state, we have retrofitted now our first home and are doing the neighbors' homes. And over the coming months, that will expand. In fact, in this initial pilot, we expect to be able to retrofit upwards of 2,000 plus homes. It is a pilot program. It is funded, again, matched with the state and with hazard mitigation dollars. And we'll be reporting back to the public and to the legislature the successes of this program, the barriers of this program, but more importantly, a framework that local governments can use to model how do we do neighborhood level mitigation, retrofitting for vulnerable and all Californians together to, again, address all the things we have already talked about of how important defensible space and home hardening are to a home's survival. And so we're very excited for sure about that project. Again, that's our home hardening financial assistance program that's underway now.
That's fantastic. Like that's a really true picture of the money at work. Like I love seeing that whenever you can get boots on the ground to get some things happening. That's very powerful, and I'm excited to also report on what that looks like in the future when things start to get more and more of these homes retrofitted and taken care of. That's awesome. Chief, speaking of California, like California and you lead the wildfire defense theories and the research, and so there are a lot of other states that are looking to California as also the gold standard of what do we do, right? And we just interviewed someone from Colorado a few weeks ago, and they let us know that they're always watching California and what California is doing because they're leading the way in prevention. And I'm curious, do some of these other states engage with you and want to communicate to try to figure out what they can do? Obviously, once a wildfire hits, that's when the attention goes up. But I'm just curious to see how engaged you are, or how engaged people are with you from other states that have wildfire-prone areas.
Yeah, no, great question. I'll start off with, as California State Fire Marshal, of course, I am narrowly focused on protecting Californians against wildfires. But we have really, over the last several years, partnered and worked with many of our neighboring states, whether it be Oregon and the Oregon State Fire Marshal. She and I are constantly talking about best practices. We've constantly kind of shared staff and resources to do best practices. We got to remember that California, based on our Mediterranean climate, naturally lends itself to wildfires. And so for decades, we have experienced the destruction of wildfires. And so we've implemented over the decades, as we've talked about, defensible space, home hardening, development standards to reduce those impacts from wildfires. And while we've continued to see that, the changing climate and so many other factors, a confluence of issues, if you will, increase the impact of wildfires here in California, we have been experiencing what now many states are just beginning to experience with fires in Colorado, fires in Oregon, and really, arguably, fires across the nation, even in states that don't necessarily have the same Mediterranean climate that we have in California and haven't had the experience of wildfires. They are seeing more and more impacts in those other states. And so we have definitely been working hard to share our lessons learned, our struggles, our successes with them. Colorado, Oregon, two of the best examples of partnership with their fire and fire marshal organizations. But I have the privilege of being a member of the National Association of State Fire Marshals. And while not all fire marshals across the state are necessarily worried or focused on wildfires, I'll tell you, I'm constantly talking about wildfires with all of them because it really is not just a California problem, it's a national problem. And here's the thing that's really important is while we in California lead a lot of efforts, including, appreciate you acknowledging, I agree, but humbly, we've led a lot of the mitigations, the standards, the testing. We still can learn a lot from our other states.
Right.
And I'm always listening to my partner in Oregon and my partners in Colorado and my partners in these other states so that I too can bring back information that they're doing successfully and bring it to California and implement it. And so while we may be the leader, we are much more humble enough to know that we can still always continue to improve on what we are doing and really hopefully continue to work as a nation towards this wildfire crisis.
Awesome. And Chief, I'm kind of praising you a lot here when I think about what you're doing in your position. But I must say, just because California has all of has grabbed the attention of many states with regards to wildfires, specifically in the last 3 years ago when we had significant fires here. It's one thing to have the significance of incidents happening. It's an entirely another thing to do something about it. And so that's where I really, hats off to you, because we could be the state that is just experiencing wildfires and we go at it half-heartedly and we don't lead change and we just kind of, go with the flow. But to really, put on our thinking caps and have strong leadership like yours to be able to communicate with other leaders. I know that's not always easy, but to get in the ring, right? To get in the ring and really wrestle through some of these things and not be afraid of what the outcome is going to be. I think that is what creates change, and that's what creates leadership. And for other states to say, great, we want to follow what they're doing, because they're actually doing it, and their actions speak louder than the words that they're saying, when you have other situations where it's entirely different and nothing's changing, and that could be very frustrating. So thank you again for your leadership and the things that you contribute for California.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have to mention the fact that this governor and this legislature have invested billions of dollars now in just the last couple of years in wildfire prevention, preparedness, and forest health measures. A number of laws have been passed that streamline and support or augment this efforts. In fact, one of the reasons that gives me and my team the ability to really continue to focus on moving the needle in wildfire preparedness is the fact that the legislature established a bill that actually developed an entire division within our office, within CAL FIRE, to just provide simple focus on wildfire prevention. And I got to note that CAL FIRE has been around for over 100 years, and prevention has always been a key piece of our organization and our culture. But as we are just even more tapped with the needs of responding to fires and addressing forest health, this new division that the legislature created, our Community Wildfire Preparedness and Mitigation Division, gives a team of wildfire experts mission organizational focus just on year-round prevention efforts. And without that funding, without these resources, the challenge would be difficult. And I have to say, my predecessors before me have paved the way to continue to make sure that California, like you said, is in the ring and working hard. There are several fire marshals that have made significant change. Chief Kate Dargan, Chief Tanya Hoover, Chief Ruben Grijalva, just to name a couple, have done a lot in wildfire mitigation space. But the funding more recently, the investments, the resources that this department and through our grant programs we have been able to push out to our local partners, together it's a groundswell of being able to accomplish a higher level of protection than really we have ever had. And of course, we are challenged with a revenue shortfall here in the state, but we are continuing to work through the challenges of a budget to make sure that our communities here in California continue to be safe. But again, it's that investment that has been made that has really helped us get to the place we're at.
So well said, because you're absolutely right. Without the funding, you have all the willingness, but you don't have enough bodies that you can hire. You don't have enough things that you can experiment with. So, no, absolutely, point well taken with California willing to invest in doing these things. So that way the needle continues to move further and we start to make even more and more progress. Thank you for that. Chief, I have another question. This is regarding brush management. And with regards to the Public Resource Code 4291 that talks about brush management, is there anything new or different that's going to be coming down the funnel here in the next year or so?
The new piece that was added into the law, as we talked about earlier, is this ember resistant zone. The first 5 feet around a home, around a structure, making sure that it's ember resistant. There's nothing in there that's flammable or that can catch on fire. That is really the near focus. I really believe that where we're at in our legislation and in our regulations, we're at the right place. Now, in the future, conditions could continue to change. Science, best practices, technology will change. And so, we'll have to continue to make sure that we're adapting to those best practices. Like I said, listening to our other states, our other countries, what they're doing. But right now, the 100 feet that's required in Public Resources Code, that ember resistant zone is that new piece. I think that's where our focus over the next decade is going to be, is just getting people into compliance with that requirement. Now, that the regulations that would support those changes in the Public Resources Code 4291 that you mentioned are under development by the state's Board of Forestry and Fire Protection. And once those get instituted and implemented, they'll go into effect for new construction. So new homes built in California will not be allowed to have certain items like trees or bark or mulch right up against the home.
Right.
The bigger challenge is going to be, how do we enforce or educate homeowners for existing homes, because the law will, a year later, go into effect for all Californians in wildfire-prone areas. And that will continue to be really our big focus here on how we enforce 4291. And I use that enforcement word, but it is so important to note that we spend significant amount of time, in fact, arguably 99% of our time, in educating folks, whether it be through resources, public education campaigns. We have some great items on our website, tools to help homeowners learn about defensible space and come into compliance. And so you will never see really a CAL FIRE inspector walking around issuing out a weed citation because you didn't trim your grass or cut down the overgrown vegetation. We're really there as a tool to help educate. And while we do that with the public, we have this amazing land use planning team that spends time with local planning officials and building officials to make sure that as growth occurs in California, that these best practices are incorporated at the local level, and that we're supporting our local officials in incorporating and following these requirements. And so education is really my focus, my team's focus, when it comes to defensible space and wildfire mitigation. And I think that it makes sense. None of us want our home to be destroyed. We all have a vested interest personally in doing this work, but it's not always easy to do. It's not always easy to know what to do. And that's where some of the online resources, the educational campaigns, the inspectors, the work we do with planners and building officials, all of these are really our focus in helping people become compliant with, as you mentioned, the state's Public Resources Code, the law related to vegetation clearance or defensible space.
Got it. You mentioned bark mulch, and it just reminded me, and Chief, this is probably happening throughout all of California. Our HOA where I live has an allowance of money to install bark mulch around the community. And so I'm like, hey guys, we need to pay more attention to what bark mulch vulnerabilities are. And what would you say to that aspect of it, of what other products is bark mulch is it that dangerous? What other products should we be using if it is dangerous?
Well, I would definitely not be here and say that you shouldn't have bark and mulch, or you shouldn't use it in your landscaping. Our focus is in that first 5 feet. We don't want that bark or mulch to be right up against the home. Bark and mulch, is flammable. It does catch on fire, and while the flame lengths and the intensity may not be as extreme as a fire in trees or in the grass, it can catch on fire. But we want to create separation. So you can have bark and mulch, you can have grass. We're not asking people to have 100 feet of nothing around their home. We're even not asking people to have 5 feet around their home with nothing. We just don't want anything that's flammable right up against the home. And so bark and mulch are okay. And we have a balance here in California. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on drought-tolerant planting and landscaping. But right across, around the 5 feet of that home, my recommendation, what I've done with my own home, pull that bark and mulch 5 feet away. Still use it, but use rock, use pavers, use something else that can cover the ground and oftentimes be just as decorative as bark and mulch. But that separation of those flammable items by 5 feet, the fire still may burn, but in a low intensity. And once it hits those rocks, those pavers, or a non-flammable item, it has nowhere to go, and that's what then kind of creates that protection of the structure. But bark and mulch are very popular landscaping items.
Right.
But I will tell you, I think, arguably, they're some of the easiest stuff to just pull back.
Absolutely.
Use a rake, use a shovel, pull it back 5 feet, replace it again with rock, with stone, pavers. The other thing, too, I'll just mention, our focus is trying to get architects in those building homes. A lot of times our homes have right outside the window or right up against the home an area for landscaping and then the sidewalk to get in front or around the home. What we're trying to get is switch that mentality. For new homes being built, put the walkway right up against the home and have just on the other side of that sidewalk the plants, the vegetation. Just by putting that sidewalk right up against the home, you've created this 5-foot ember resistant zone. Now obviously, that's something that is much cheaper and easier to do at time of construction, and those are some of the efforts that we're doing with our building partners, the building industry, and our developers, making sure that they have tools to really know that just that simple change of flip-flopping the landscaping and the sidewalk can make a major difference and make it easier for homeowners to maintain that first 5 feet.
What a great point, because we've been out to certain inspections and we met with the landscape architect who prides himself in how beautiful this estate is, and 100% it's amazing. And when we got to the 0 to 5 and we started to explain some of the things that should be considered to be removed, he was almost insulted by it. And it wasn't until 30 minutes later, after we did a full walkthrough of the home and really talked about the vulnerabilities and what could take place, he said, wow, I had no idea that the home is so vulnerable. Now that I understand more about wildfire, I'm going to make it a point to begin to change my mindset onto how I can design these homes on the landscaping to be a lot more friendlier. And so I thought that was such a great breakthrough for him. But to your point, more people, more professionals have to be educated on how they can really help this cause, instead of being offended that their design is now causing some vulnerabilities. So that's a great share, and I think the continued education piece is massive.
It's understandable that people can be attached to their landscaping. If your mother planted some roses 50 years ago and you now own the home and maintain them, these are your mom's roses. They're beautiful right outside your window. They're a reminder of your loved one. And so it creates this emotional attachment to the landscaping. And of course, we don't want to live in a prison that's cinder block. We want to have color. We want to have live plants. But it's just about that spacing. It's about the right plant, the right brush or tree in the right place. We still want all that stuff, just not right up against the home.
Perfect. And Chief, one of my almost final questions here is I want to be respectful of your time. When we see these airplanes dropping fire retardant out of the sky, we're curious, because when I see these wildfires happen, I sometimes was evacuated in 2020, and I saw the hillside glowing on the backside, and I thought, man, what triggers the plane to actually go out? Because I'm like, we should have a plane drop right here, right now. But I'm sure there's some things that have to happen, and some correspondence and things that trigger that kind of response where you have these tankers that are deployed. Can you share a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I'll tell you, at CAL FIRE, we pride ourselves on owning and using the largest wildland air fleet in the world.
Wow.
We have more air tankers and helicopters and new ones. If you haven't seen, we've been replacing our helicopters with the civilian version of a Black Hawk. We call them the Firehawk helicopter. We have 6 new C-130 air tankers that will start to come online this year that we recently acquired. But it is a well-orchestrated response. Our incident commanders on the ground direct not just the ground resources, the fire engines, the firefighters, the bulldozers, the hand crews, but they're also directing the air resources. But in every fire, we also dispatch out an air tactical platform. This is a smaller plane that doesn't carry retardant. It has a pilot and an air tactical supervisor, and that individual and that plane will fly right over the fire at a higher elevation, and they'll coordinate with the incident commander on the ground, and they will direct the helicopters and the air tankers where to drop. And so it is very well orchestrated. There's a lot that goes into it. We're using multiple aircraft. We're using different types of aircraft, air tankers and helicopters. And to make sure that we do that safely does take a significant amount of coordination. But in every wildland response, not only are we sending a strong ground response, but we send an air response. Typically on every wildfire in the summer, 2 air tankers and a helicopter and an air tactical airplane will respond to that fire, and they'll make that assessment. Do we need more resources? But where we drop is very, very intentional. And it's really important to note that we really work hard to make sure that environmentally we are not dropping in streams and waterways. And when we do that, we report that quickly. It's important to note that retardant that is dropped not only really just kind of sucks out the oxygen from the fire as it burns into it, helping to slow down and retard the fire, but it also has a fertilizer base to it to help generate regrowth after the fire. But all of our wildfire response is a well-orchestrated, well-trained, well-experienced process.
Awesome. And what a great resource. Well, I think for all of us residents, when we see it drop, it's like, thank goodness that it's coming, right? And it just gives the firefighters more time and chance to get a hold of this. Chief?
Our firefighters
Yes.
would not be happy with me if I did not just make clear, it's the firefighters on the ground that put out wildfires. But in combination with the air fleet, like you said, the helicopters, the air tankers, they slow down the fire so that our firefighters can actually put it out. And that's where it just comes back to teamwork. But yes, when I hear an air tanker fly over and there's smoke in the air, I know that help is on the way. They are fast and they are specific, and it is a great response on the ground and in the air.
Boom, boom. Wow, what an effort it takes of resources, of people, of expertise on the ground, in the air. Amazing. Chief, continue doing what you're doing because we love seeing that take place. Chief, before we leave, is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners that's on your mind, in your heart, that you want to just make sure that we deliver if we haven't covered that to date?
It's so important to understand that here in California, we will have wildfires. Again, wildfires have occurred naturally in California well before modern civilization. And so we have to adapt to wildfires. We have to prepare for wildfires. We have so many great resources on our website, readyforwildfire.org. On that site, you can find tips on creating a defensible space, on hardening your home. We have an assessment tool. You can actually walk around and do your own inspection, and it will not just, again, kind of keep a track of what you've done and what you haven't done, but it will give you tips specific to the way you answer it on things that you can improve on. And so that defensible space assessment tool is so important. And we just recently launched an app that can be accessed mobilely on Ready for Wildfire called our Fire Planner. And it can give you a schedule and information on steps you can take to not only prepare your home, but prepare yourself and your family, as well as your entire community for wildfire. Because at the end of the day, wildfire is coming. And so the question really is, are you ready? Boom.
I think all of us as listeners really need to log in and really take advantage of the resources, because it's been a few months since I've been online to look at those resources, but I could imagine that there's significant valuable items in there that we could take advantage. Like you said, our fire planner, right? Like, I want to look at that and see what that looks like, for not only because the reality, Chief, is that we never know when the wildfire is going to hit. So we could be at work, my spouse could be at home, and the power lines are down or the phone lines are down. we should plan now, right? And understand if this happens, this is what we're going to do and what we could expect. Because without it, we have our own internal family chaos in addition to the environment or whatever is going on with the wildfire. I love it. Chief Berlant, thank you so much for being an honored guest on our show. And I look forward to maybe in the next year to see kind of recap some of the changes that you've implemented and how things are going. So thank you so very much. Really do appreciate your presence here.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of All Things Wildfire. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our show and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things wildfire. And as always, thanks for listening.